What's up, Buff fans? It's certainly been a minute. Troy and I are back for another installment of the C Sports Report podcast. A lot to recap on. The Buffs have played 3 games against North Dakota State, Nebraska, and Colorado State. We've seen a lot of elements to this team, weaknesses and strengths, and now they're opening up with Big 12 conference play against Baylor for the homecoming game this Saturday. Forecast rain into the evening. Um,
Allegedly,
yeah, this is just hearsay on the rain. I'm glad it's gonna be sunny though
depending
because
on who
it's
you ask.
shameless plug. My birthday is tomorrow and it's gonna be a beautiful day. So we get a good day on Friday. Saturday there should be some rain and also some good football being played because what we've seen, at least throughout this week, that these teams are kind of evenly matched. I mean, both on and off the field. Like their stories are similar from last year. 3-9 Baylor, 4-8 Colorado. Switched up the coaching staff a bit on Baylor side and of course on the Colorado side. Baylor brought some new guys in. Of course, Colorado brought some guys in just to reestablish the program and just have a better outcome at the end of the season and hopefully a bowl game for each of those teams. Baylor was not one of the best teams in the Big 12 last year, that's for sure. And they're looking to be better. And so far, they are 2-1, win against Tarleton State, FCS team, win against Air Force. They played last week, and they got rolled against Power Four team Utah. Similarly with Colorado, FCS, Power Four, Mountain West. So should be a good game. I'm expecting a good game. When you see Baylor, I guess like I always just get really ahead of myself and just talk and talk and talk. Let's rewind a bit because we haven't talked together in a while. You reviewed the tape on Colorado State. I was there at the game, and that was the first instance where we saw some actual commitment and a semblance of a ground presence. Michael Welch, I believe 9 carries and 65 yards, and his second carry. I know you were saying it's his first carry, but it was his second carry that was 25 yards. His first carry was 2 yards.
It was one of his first carries.
Yeah, it was one of his first
That
carries.
was
I just had to say that, but it was finally it was the first 23-yard run since Dylan Edwards against Washington State last year, and it was the first 100-yard rushing game since Arizona of last year. So this is something that Buff fans and we've been really looking for out of this team, and now looks like they have a little bit more gas in that area. What did you see just on the ground against Colorado State? And what do you think of that game overall?
Yeah, there were a lot of positive signs, no question about it. A lot of the things that we wanted to see after the Nebraska game picked up a little bit. Obviously, the running game being one of them, the offensive line being another. I like the fact that they were willing to experiment up front. They swapped Tyler Brown over to left guard. Philip Houston came in at right tackle, and Justin Mayers went to the bench, and it worked. And it also should be noted that the Colorado State front is probably the worst front that they'll play um, all year. But look, you can only play who's in front of you, and that's the type of performance that they can really build off of. It was great to see Micah Welch have so much success in the run game. I wrote yesterday that I thought he created more yards for himself on his own than it felt like the other CU backs have been able to. He used his vision. He was willing to bounce the ball outside. He was willing to cut it back. He runs with such a downhill physical style. He's able to break tackles and he's got some juice to him. And it didn't feel like they really had that in the first couple weeks. I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested to see whenever Dallin Hayden is back from that ankle sprain, if he can provide that as well, because he was running into a lot of heavy boxes against Nebraska, against North Dakota State. Didn't really have a lot of space to operate like Welch did in Fort Collins um, on Saturday, but it was a lot of good signs. And then the pass protection I thought was pretty good. It was definitely much better than it had been. A lot of the different stunts and twists and games that Nebraska was really hurting CU with. CSU tried all of that stuff. It was a big part of their plan in the first half, and the Buffs did a much better job communicating, passing those off, picking those up. The pocket still got pushed a lot. It was still that it was the pocket was still getting pushed back into Shadur's lap, and he was kind of having to escape backwards at times. But overall, they were staying in front of guys, they were picking guys up, and that's a positive sign that I really think they can build on.
Yeah, and of course, I think what has been just such a pivotal point in this team and their growth is the defense. The last 6 quarters, the Buffs defense have held their opponents just 9 points. In Nebraska, the first half, we know that was just one of the worst halves of football I think I've ever watched. But the second half, the way that they really went around those in-game adjustments and attacked Nebraska on all fronts to prevent them from scoring and held Colorado State just to one touchdown. I am really impressed with, when you bring in a defensive coordinator, you just don't know how things are going to meld, how things are going to look. But the way that Robert Livingston is approaching this is allowing them to play free. And you see a lot of those results with just the front and the back of the defense. I mean, we haven't, Shiloh Sanders got injured against Nebraska, but guys like Carter Stoutmeyer, guys like Anquin Barnes stepping in for Chidozie Nwankwo, they are able to play their own games and also perform. I think just against Colorado State, it's like Colorado State is not a good team. So it's like, how good did Colorado look against Colorado State? Is Colorado this really formidable team that they can be, or did Colorado State just make them look, better than they actually are? Because we saw a game the week prior against Nebraska where it was like, oh boy. But we saw a defense that was much more stable and an offense that was just really struggling. I like the as you mentioned, the switches on the offensive line, and they're running with that same offensive line against Baylor this week. So, another test for these guys. The only, examples we have of this team against Power Four offense is Nebraska. So, are we going to see potentially those same results against Baylor, even though they are a different team than Nebraska?
Yeah, we could look at it. Baylor plays a totally different style than Nebraska, which you will get to in a few minutes. But the defense, I thought there were good signs regardless of the competition against CSU. Obviously, holding them to just 9 points. The touchdown came off of one popped run in a short yardage situation late in the game. I You mentioned Anquin Barnes. Rewatching the game the other day, if the first couple series, every single time CSU ran the ball, it was like Anquin Barnes is in the backfield. Anquin Barnes is in the backfield again. Anquin Barnes is in the backfield again. He was blowing up that CSU interior offensive line consistently. He's 2 yards on the backfield, 3 yards in the backfield, and I think he was only in the box score with two tackles, so he didn't always make the stop behind the line of scrimmage. But he's blowing up the gaps. He's getting the running back off of out of the design play, and then he's occupying so many offensive linemen that the linebackers are able to clean it up and make tackles for no gain, tackles for -1 yards. That's something that Levante Bentley talked about on Tuesday. And the linebackers are just so fun to watch. I mean, Levante Bentley and Nakai Hill Green, those guys are maniacs. They are
Mm-hmm.
banshees in the best way possible. Those dudes are thumpers, man. They fly downhill. They bring the fight to the other team. They're so physical. And that's really been something that it's been kind of an attitude that this team was missing a little bit. And I think those two guys are really bringing it. I have some questions still about them in coverage. CU will play teams that try to expose that. North Dakota State did a little bit in week one when Nikhil Green did not play. But like when they get to a Kansas State, that type of team will try to expose that. But those guys are bringing an attitude and a physicality that CU didn't really have before. And then we know the secondary is good. We know those guys can cover. We know Travis Hunter's going to make plays. So yeah, very encouraging performance on that side of the ball. Now we can get to Baylor.
Yeah,
Good day.
I agree just what you're saying with Levante Bentley. Like you can really see just I mean, the second half of the season last year, that's when he really stepped up and played his best game. He had his, a little bit of hardship at the beginning of the season, but now he's really playing at a level that shows like, yes, this is your final season. You really have to prove yourself to these scouts and show that you are potentially able to play at the next level. And he's really doing a good job of orchestrating both the front of the defense and the back of the defense. I don't think we've talked about it with the coaches yet, but I know one of the linebackers have the green dot, and I'm pretty sure it's him
Yeah, Levant.
orchestrating those plays. So I'm loving seeing from Levante Bentley and Nikai Hill Green. I think they're such a dynamic duo together. And like you said, the defensive line completing their assignments, allowing the linebackers to get to guys that make it, maybe make it to the second level there. And this defense is just really is what is keeping Colorado in games so far. So now we can get to
Bentley's, uh,
Baylor.
Bentley's
Um,
strip, Bentley's solo strip and fumble recovery was such an awesome play.
oh yeah, I mean, it was so great to see Hodge, Bentley, and Travis just get involved because they were, of course, they were really lacking a little bit more turnovers, and now we're seeing a little bit more of that, more sacks.
Travis,
BJ Green was
Travis
itching to
interception.
get a sack. What?
Travis interception was so crazy too. When
I
I watching
know.
it, it was watching it live, it was like, oh, Travis made another play. But watching it back, it was like, oh my goodness, man, that was an insane play.
I know his IQ and his eyes on and his ability to get in front of receivers when he is in that situation. Oh, he's so good. I mean, he's in the Heisman conversation, so maybe we can go to New York. These are all plans in the future. I like to get really ahead of myself, but Saturday, Baylor homecoming game. Dave Aranda is calling the defensive plays. Their quarterback, DeQuan Finn, is certainly questionable. Dave Aranda said, let me pull up the quote. He said they're still evaluating him. It's day to day. He got out of his sling on Monday. He's able to move better. There's limitations on what he can do per day, but I think we're in a good spot. That's what he said. So when you're recovering from a rib injury, specifically referencing Alex Fontenot from last year, he suffered a rib injury and he was out for 4 weeks. Finn suffered that injury against Utah, so it's been 2 weeks, a week and a half. So I don't anticipate him being active in this game. So Sawyer Robertson, the backup, who threw for 248 yards and no touchdowns. They're a big rushing touchdown team, at least against Air Force. They scored 3 rushing touchdowns. He's able to move the ball, and I just feel like I saw with Baylor, at least against Air Force. Utah, they certainly did struggle because Utah is one of the best teams in the Big 12 and favored to win the championship, the Big 12 championship this year. But what I saw against Air Force was a team that was equally balanced on the ground. Of course, with your backup quarterback, they are going to do a lot of handoff. There is going to be more presence in rushing aspects of it. But in the past game, Sawyer Robinson was able to find his guys and capitalize on that side of the offense as well. So they're able to do a little bit of both. Their offensive line is good at protecting. I don't know how many sacks they've allowed, but it's been definitely less than Shedeur Sanders total this season. When I'm curious to see how the Bucs defense takes the next step and really presents themselves in a strong and disruptive manner against Baylor in their front and what they're showing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because it's a totally different game depending on who's at quarterback. Baylor has given up 5 sacks, so less than,
Thank you.
but uh, it's a totally different game. Look, if Finn plays, he has an element of creation, an element of just as a playmaker that Sawyer Robinson doesn't have. Sawyer Robinson's going to be more within the structure of the offense, more, kind of a point guard style of quarterback. And look, that's better for CU.
Mm.
Cam Miller for North Dakota State really hurt CU with his scrambling in week 1, and that's something that DeQuan Finn is capable of as well. But it's going to be a different game for CU on the defensive side. Baylor's going to spread it out. They're going to throw it. They have a diverse running game. They use a lot of different running backs.
Mm.
It'll be interesting to kind of see. They haven't really played a close game yet. And they kind of got back into the game against Utah after Cam Rising went down, but they were never really in a position to come back and tie the game or win the game. And then their other 2 games were blowouts. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what the running back usage looks like for them and just kind of how they want to attack. Where do they think the weaknesses in the CU defense are because they prove they can run the ball against Air Force. They've shown that. And then but the scheme, they want to throw the ball. It's a spread scheme. Like they have a lot of speed on the outside. They've got weapons. So it'll be interesting to see how they want to attack CU, and also if it is Sawyer Robertson, how much do they trust him? Like, do they trust him to come in on the road and throw the ball 30 times, 35 times, 40 times to win? Especially if CU's putting up points on the other side of the ball, which we'll get to in a minute. But it's just kind of Baylor's plan is just what I'm really paying attention to because I'm not the quarterback situation makes it really murky, obviously, but it's just something that I don't really know what to expect from them.
Yeah, something
Based
that you're monitoring for sure, because Coach Prime said that they are preparing for two quarterbacks, and it does change the way that the defense shows up and presents himself on the field. I mean, I think the box is going to be pretty loaded up on the Buffs. And when I'm interested to see, I think they did so well in red zone defense and third down defense against Colorado State. Of course, a very different team from Baylor, but I think this will be another important test to see how well can Colorado really stop the run. I mean, so far they've been really good this season, and that front has been able to stop running backs pretty well. Of course, like you said, Cam Miller, like these QB scrambles that slip away from them when they decide to take an alternative route. There are times where they do miss those reads. So that's something that I'll be monitoring because their third down defense was probably the best that it was this entire season against Colorado State. Will it be the same product against Baylor? That is the question. On the
Still
offensive
curious.
side, yeah,
I'm still curious about the pass rush for CU. That was kind of one of the spots that
yeah, they've been like changing it up a bunch.
we were expecting that to be outside of the second. Like we were expecting the pass rush and the edge group to be the strength of the front seven, and that really hasn't been the case. They were a little bit better against Colorado State, but they were pretty much non-existent against Nebraska. They had some moments late against North Dakota State, but other than that, it was they were just they're not affecting the game in the way that I kind of thought they were. So that's
Yeah.
something against, especially if Baylor is out there and they're throwing the ball a lot. That's something that I am keeping an eye on as well.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see flashes from Dan Hayes. Maybe some. I think we'd all like to see more from BJ Green at the moment. I think he is going to get there eventually. He is definitely hungry to get a sack and be, one of the most disruptive guys on the game. He was named Big 12 preseason defensive end for Big 12 preseason all Big 12 preseason. Oh my God, on the team. He was on the Big 12 preseason team. So I know we there was just so much talk about him and what he provided and what he showed against Arizona State. It's not quite aligned with what we're seeing at Colorado, but I think he is going to get there and he is going to have a big game. On the side of the ball, we know that Baylor has been up against predominantly run heavy teams with Air Force, Utah, and Tarleton State. So this will be Baylor's first appearance against a quarterback who is also potentially up for Heisman candidacy, has incredible arm talent. When he has a clean pocket, he can really throw it to any one of his wide receiver weapons. Dave Aranda hasn't seen this season as he is. This is his first year calling defensive plays. Hasn't seen an offense of this passing caliber quite yet. When the offensive line is actually protecting Shador, so once again, they know that Baylor's defense knows that the weakness here is Colorado's offensive line, so they're certainly going to try to exploit that. So keeping Shador Sanders on his own 2 feet and allowing him to be the quarterback that we all know he is and the ceiling that he has in his performance, he can really just exploit Baylor's secondary and just do what he does best. So when you see this offensive and defensive matchup, where do you feel like Baylor is the strongest?
I think their secondary is pretty good. And I think that there might be a bit of an adjustment period for CU because Dave Aranda defenses he changes the picture a lot after the snap. What you see before the snap is not what you see after the snap. So that might take some getting used to for Shador. He's a very good, he's a good processor. And he kind of, this kind of happened against CSU too, where he kind of had to settle into the game the first quarter, quarter and a half, and then they finally started to get to some of the stuff that they really wanted to get to. Um, the difference with Baylor, Nebraska kind of did that too. They did a lot of change in the picture, and it confused Shador at times, and it confused the CU offense at times. The difference is that the Baylor front is not as good as Nebraska. So, and with the offensive line changes, if in fact they do hold up like last week, it won't be a total slaughter on the line of scrimmage, hopefully. But the Baylor secondary is good. That matchup with them against the CU wide receivers will really be fun to watch. I think that the Buffs are doing a lot better job getting LaJohntay Wester and Will Sheppard involved. LaJohntay obviously had the two touchdowns last week. Will Sheppard is kind of in and out sometimes. Shadur trusts him with some routes on the outside. He tried to give him a go ball last week. He couldn't come down with it. He did get one against Nebraska, so I'm curious if they try to lean into that a little more. We know Travis is going to end up with 10 catches.
Yeah, 100 yards.
So, um, and then Jimmy Horn's role has kind of waned. He's
Hmm.
he's been a focal point for Nebraska and CSU after the big game in week one, naturally. But I'm curious if they try to get to some more things to kind of get him the ball in space, let him use his speed to operate. But the other thing that Jimmy Horn does is he stretches the defense vertically. That's why you see LaJohntay Wester and Travis able to, come underneath him, these digs, these curls, these crossers that they're getting so many of. Jimmy Horn stretches the defense vertically, and then that opens that up. But Baylor's got a talented secondary. They're fast, they're athletic, just like they are on the perimeter on offense. The same goes for their defense, and they run. Like I said, it's a lot of post snap. You know, they adjust a lot. They give you different looks. They show you one thing before the snap, they get into another after the snap. So it might take some adjusting for CU, but I'm curious to watch the matchup on the outside.
Yeah, I'm excited for a home game finally. I feel like we've been traveling. I mean, Nebraska, Colorado State. I'm excited to be back home for another game, homecoming game. So, score
Now that
predictions for this
now that
game.
we've talked about passing on both sides, it's going to be pouring rain the whole time, and both
Yeah, they're gonna run the
strong for the hard
ball. Because sometimes Colorado rain, it's not like Seattle rain or rain, in a humid climate. It's like
could be
quick, but it's not like it's a lot at once and then it stops and then it's a lot again. But
It
still,
does
it's very it's tricky.
sounds like the rain might just be a precursor for next week, but
Hurricane.
teaser. They call that a tease.
Oh my God, playing in a hurricane? Wow. Okay, score predictions for Baylor. I have Colorado at 35 and Baylor at 27. I just feel like this offense against this Baylor's defense just has the upper hand here. I know I say that like every week, and it does, as you mentioned, like it does take Shador and this offense to really like get in a rhythm, get those guys going. But I feel like with the momentum from Colorado State and the way that Pat Shermer and Shador and everyone is really settling in, I think they'll be able to capitalize on Baylor with a defense that hasn't really seen a predominantly passing attack this season, and we'll be able to learn a lot of lessons from Shador and the gang.
I've got less points than that, but I think we land in a pretty similar spot. I went with Colorado 24, Baylor 20.
Mm,
I just I don't trust the Baylor offense fully at this point to do a ton against the Colorado. Like I don't know what is the one thing that the Baylor offense can lean on to really hurt Colorado's defense. Like Nebraska ran the ball power in the first half and gashed them
yeah.
over. And North Dakota State was in heavy bodies, and then they isolated the linebackers in coverage. Cam Miller scrambled a lot. I just don't know, especially if DeQuan Finn is out. I don't know what the bread and butter is going to be for Baylor to attack because it's hard to just go at the secondary over and over and over and over. you've got to be a little bit creative and attack the front seven in different ways. And I just don't know if Baylor is equipped to do that. And then offensively, um, like I said, I'm kind of expecting another slow start offensively for CU, but look, they're going to come up with explosives at some point. And the only games that you see them really shut down the entire time, last year and this year, are the games where the front is just totally overwhelmed, and I don't see that uh, being a major issue. I do think Baylor can give them some problems, but I don't think it'll be like Nebraska where snap after snap there's three
Yeah,
guys in the backfield, and it's so I feel good about CU in this one, 24-20.
nice. Well, good analysis, Troy. Once again, we will see you guys on Saturday for the game. Stay dry and let's go Buffs.